I never thought one stupid decision to crash a wedding would spiral into something that would change my entire life, but that's exactly what happened. I was never the type to dress up, never the type to fit in at fancy gatherings, but I was curious, reckless even, and when my best friend dared me to sneak into a wedding just for the thrill, I didn't think twice. It was supposed to be harmless fun, blend in with the crowd, eat the food, maybe dance a little, and then slip out unnoticed. But life doesn't always follow the plan you imagine. The wedding was huge, extravagant, and full of people I didn't know. I slipped through the doors of the reception hall like I belonged there, adjusting the borrowed suit I wore, hoping no one would question me. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, the music floated across the hall, and everyone seemed too busy celebrating to notice one extra guest. My heart was racing, but in a weird way, it was thrilling. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was part of something. I walked among strangers as though I was invisible, and for a while, I thought I had gotten away with it. But then the mistake. The bride's family mistook me for someone else, a cousin who was supposed to arrive late. I didn't correct them. I smiled nervously and let myself be pulled into conversations I didn't belong in. The more I played along, the deeper I got. Every time I wanted to slip away, someone stopped me, asking questions, offering drinks, introducing me to others. My plan to sneak in and sneak out dissolved as the evening trapped me tighter in its web. Then came the twist of fate. Somewhere in the chaos, the bride vanished. No one could find her. Whispers rippled through the crowd, panic rising like smoke. The wedding was about to collapse into disaster. And that's when the bride's frantic mother turned to me. Her eyes were wild, her voice trembling, and she begged me to help keep the guests calm. Before I could protest, before I could explain who I really was, someone shoved me toward the bridal suite. Inside, hanging on the rack, was the wedding dress. White, shimmering, breathtaking. A gown meant for someone else. And suddenly, I was surrounded by bridesmaids, their hands tugging, their voices insisting. They said I had to step in, just for a moment, just until the real bride came back. They said no one could know, or the entire evening would collapse. My protests fell on deaf ears. The next thing I knew, fabric rustled around me, zippers closed, pins secured. Makeup brushes swept across my face, a veil cascaded over my hair, and when I caught my reflection in the mirror, I froze. I didn't look like me anymore. I looked like a bride. I wanted to scream, to run, to confess the truth, but something inside me hesitated. My heart pounded as footsteps echoed outside, the announcement blaring that the ceremony would continue. The bridesmaids pushed me forward, and I walked out into a hall full of strangers who cheered at the sight of me. My legs shook, my hands trembled, but I kept moving because I had no choice. Every eye was on me, every whisper echoed, and I could barely breathe beneath the weight of expectation. The groom stood at the altar, confusion flickering across his face, but before he could question anything, the officiant began. My mind screamed that I had to stop this, but my body kept going through the motions. Each word of the ceremony echoed like thunder in my ears. I was living a lie in front of hundreds of people, and yet no one seemed to notice. No one except me. When the moment came to speak, to vow, to promise, I almost broke down. My voice cracked, my throat tightened, and for a second, I thought the truth would pour out. But then I saw the groom's eyes, not angry, not suspicious, but strangely kind, as if he understood that something bigger was happening. And instead of exposing me, he went along with it. That choice saved me, but it also trapped me. The night blurred into a haze of photographs, dances, and endless congratulations. Everyone told me how radiant I looked, how perfect everything turned out, and I smiled because that's what they expected. Inside, though, I was unraveling. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't supposed to feel the strange sense of belonging I felt every time someone called me beautiful, every time I saw myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. Hours later, when the celebration finally began to thin out, I thought I could slip away and disappear back into my old life. But the groom found me first. He cornered me gently, his voice low so no one else could hear, and he asked me the question I had been dreading. Who are you really? The truth spilled out in a rush. I wasn't family. I wasn't invited. I wasn't even supposed to be wearing that dress. I was just someone who stumbled into a moment far bigger than myself. I braced for anger, for outrage, for humiliation. But instead, he laughed softly, shaking his head as if life had just played the biggest trick on both of us. You saved them, he said. You saved the night. Do you realize that? I didn't. I couldn't. All I knew was that I was standing there in a dress that wasn't mine, in a role I never chose, and yet a strange part of me didn't want to let go. It was terrifying and comforting all at once. For the first time, I wondered if maybe the accident wasn't really an accident at all. Maybe it was a mirror, forcing me to see something I had been ignoring for years. The next morning, the real bride was found. She had run away, overwhelmed by fear and pressure, unwilling to go through with it. The scandal shook the families, but strangely, their anger wasn't at me. Somehow, they believed I had helped save them from complete embarrassment. Whispers spread, stories twisted, and by the time the dust settled, I was no longer the intruder. I was the stand-in who had kept everything from falling apart. But the truth didn't disappear with the party. When I went home, when the makeup washed off and the dress returned to its hanger, the reflection in the mirror haunted me. I couldn't unsee the bride staring back at me. I couldn't forget how it felt to be seen, truly seen, even if it was by mistake. I tried to bury it, to move on, to pretend it never happened, but life has a way of pushing truths you don't want to face. Weeks turned into months, and the whispers in my head grew louder. That night had changed me. I began experimenting quietly, secretly, with clothes, with makeup, with expressions I had never allowed myself before. At first, it was curiosity. Then it became comfort. And eventually, it became identity. What started as a wedding crash gone wrong became the moment I realized who I really was beneath the surface. Not everyone understood. Some laughed, some judged, some turned away. But others stayed. Others reminded me that courage isn't about never being afraid, it's about stepping forward even when you are. That night taught me that secrets only hold power if you let them, and that sometimes the strangest mistakes reveal the truest parts of ourselves. I never told the whole story to most people. To them, it was just a rumor, a strange twist in someone else's wedding drama. But to me, it was the night I was forced into a role I never thought I could play, only to realize that maybe I was never playing at all. And that's how one reckless dare turned into the beginning of my transformation. The night I thought I was just crashing a wedding became the night I discovered myself. The night I was supposed to vanish into the crowd became the night I stood at the center of it all. And even though I wasn't the real bride, for a fleeting, unforgettable moment, I truly was. Because sometimes life dresses you in roles you never expect, and sometimes, if you're brave enough to wear them, you discover they fit better than anything you've ever known. I thought the memory of that night would fade, but instead it replayed endlessly in my mind, like a scene I couldn't stop watching. Every moment of the transformation felt burned into me, the tug of the gown as it slid over my shoulders, the weight of the veil falling down, the hush that came over the room as I stepped out. It was all supposed to be pretend, just a performance, yet nothing in my life had ever felt more real. When the bridesmaids first pulled me into that room, my whole body shook with panic. I remember trying to explain, to insist they had the wrong person, but they were too frantic to listen. Their voices overlapped, snapping instructions, pinning fabric, brushing powders over my skin. I opened my mouth to protest again, but one of them pressed a finger to my lips and said, "We don't have time, just trust me." And in that instant, I gave in. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't find the strength to fight. The moment the zipper closed on my back, I felt trapped, yet strangely transformed. The gown was heavy, yet it carried me, reshaping every line of my body. My hands trembled as they adjusted the lace gloves, and when they slipped the ring onto my finger just for show, I almost lost my breath. Each layer they added stripped away something I thought I knew about myself. By the time the veil settled against my cheeks, I couldn't see the old me anymore. Only the stranger in the mirror. Only the bride. I stumbled when they guided me to the door. My legs, and used to heels, wobbled under me, but they tightened their grip on my arms, steadying me like I belonged there. As the doors opened and the music swelled, I swear the room fell silent. The crowd rose to their feet, eyes shining, smiles beaming, and all of it aimed at me. For a fleeting second, I wanted to scream that it was a mistake, that I was nobody, but the sound stuck in my throat. Instead, I walked, step by shaky step, down the aisle toward the altar, every gaze pressing against me, every whisper echoing in my ears. The groom's expression when he first saw me is something I'll never forget. Shock, yes, but behind it, something softer, something almost protective. He must have known instantly that I wasn't her, and yet he didn't expose me. He simply reached out his hand, steadying me as though inviting me to keep going. That gesture anchored me in a storm of chaos. The officiant's words blurred together, my mind racing faster than my heart. Every time he asked a question, every time the crowd nodded approvingly, I felt like I was dangling over a cliff. And yet, somehow, the cliff didn't collapse. Somehow, they believed it. They believed me. Then came the vows. My lips quivered, my voice cracked, and I thought surely they'd all hear the lie. But when I looked out into that sea of faces, beaming relatives, clapping hands, teary-eyed mothers, I realized they weren't seeing me. They were seeing the idea of a bride, the symbol they wanted, the role filled, and in that moment I filled it. Against all odds, I became what they needed me to be. I remember trembling as the words slipped out of my mouth, rehearsed vows I didn't even mean, and yet somehow they felt heavier than anything I had ever spoken before. Every syllable pulled me deeper into the illusion, until I could no longer tell if I was pretending or revealing some hidden truth. When the ceremony ended, when the applause thundered through the hall, I thought it was over. I thought I could retreat, take off the gown, slip back into my old skin, and vanish. But that wasn't how it worked. The photographs came next. Flash after flash. Poses I didn't know how to hold. Laughter I forced, but that somehow looked genuine in the camera's eye. Guests congratulated me, embraced me, called me beautiful in ways I had never heard before. Each compliment sank deeper than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just praise, it was recognition. They were seeing me, even if it was under false pretenses, and part of me had craved that for so long without even realizing it. Dancing was the hardest. My shoes pinched, the dress clung, and my heart thumped louder than the music. Yet when the groom placed his hand on my waist and guided me across the floor, the crowd melted away. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't love, it was survival. He whispered softly, asking me who I really was, but his tone wasn't accusing. It was curious, gentle, like he wanted to understand, not condemn. I shook my head, unable to answer, and he simply nodded as if to say, "Not yet. That's okay." The longer the night went on, the less it felt like a disguise. My movements grew steadier, my voice less shaky, my smile less forced. Somewhere between the toasts and the final dance, I realized I wasn't pretending anymore. I was inhabiting a version of myself I didn't know existed, and it terrified me. Because when the morning came, when the lights dimmed and reality returned, how was I supposed to go back? How was I supposed to unfeel what I had felt? When the truth finally broke that the real bride had run away, that the night had been a carefully disguised disaster, I thought everything would collapse. But instead, they turned to me with gratitude. They said I had saved the wedding from humiliation, that I had kept the illusion alive long enough to protect the families from gossip. I nodded along, but inside, I knew the truth was more complicated. I hadn't just saved them, I had awakened something in myself. Something I couldn't bury again. And that's why the story didn't end when the gown came off. That's why the real transformation wasn't the one they saw that night, but the one that unfolded slowly, painfully, in the weeks after. Because once you've glimpsed the reflection of who you could be, you can't force yourself to forget it. You can't pretend the mirror lied. The longer the night dragged on, the more I felt the weight of the lie pressing against me, but at the same time, the more I felt something shifting inside. Guests kept approaching me, showering me with words I had never expected to hear in my life. They told me I was glowing, that I looked like a dream, that I seemed destined for the role I now occupied. Every time someone said it, a knot twisted in my stomach. I wanted to tell them the truth, to admit that I didn't belong, that this was all a dangerous mistake. But their eyes sparkled with joy, and their belief was so unshakable that I couldn't bring myself to shatter it. I smiled and nodded, hiding the storm inside. There were close calls. One aunt pulled me aside, gripping my hand tightly, and said she remembered rocking me to sleep when I was just a baby. I froze, my throat dry, searching for words that wouldn't reveal me. I simply smiled and whispered, "Thank you," before slipping away. Another cousin insisted on taking photos with me, reminiscing about moments that had never happened. I laughed nervously, dodging questions, praying no one would dig too deeply. Every step I took was like walking a tightrope over fire. The more people believed, the more dangerous it became if I slipped. Yet the more I played the part, the more natural it started to feel. My voice softened, my gestures grew more fluid, and when I caught my reflection in the polished surfaces around the hall, I didn't recoil. Instead, I found myself staring too long, captivated by the version of me staring back. Hours later, when the final dance ended and the music softened, exhaustion hit me. I stumbled into the bridal suite to catch my breath, pulling the veil off my head. For the first time that night, I saw my bare face under the layers of makeup, and I didn't recognize myself. But rather than fear, there was a strange comfort in it. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was revealing. That was when the groom appeared at the door. His expression was unreadable as he stepped inside, closing it gently behind him. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, studying me. I expected fury, demands for answers, but instead he spoke in a quiet, steady voice. "You're not her, are you?" The words cut through the air, and I couldn't lie anymore. My lips trembled as I confessed everything: the dare, the crash, the mistake that snowballed into this impossible charade. I braced for the explosion, for the anger that would surely end me. But instead, he chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You must have been terrified," he said. And I was. More terrified than I had ever been, yet also more alive. He didn't expose me. He didn't drag me into the light. He simply told me that for one night, I had carried something heavy, and I had done it with more strength than I realized. His words struck deeper than he knew, because beneath all the lies, there had been a truth I was too afraid to name, and he had seen it. The morning after was chaos. The real bride's absence could no longer be hidden. Whispers spread like wildfire, accusations flying, families panicking. And yet, strangely, I wasn't blamed. In fact, I was thanked. They said I had saved face, prevented humiliation, kept the night from collapsing into scandal. The irony was sharp. I had started as a trespasser, an imposter, yet somehow I had become their unlikely savior. When I finally shed the dress and returned home, the silence was deafening. I thought slipping back into my old clothes would make me feel safe again, but instead, I felt hollow. The mirror no longer showed the stranger in white, but the old reflection felt incomplete. The memory of that gown, that veil, that applause, haunted me. It whispered questions I wasn't ready to face, yet couldn't silence anymore. Days passed, then weeks. I tried to bury it, but curiosity gnawed at me. Late at night, when no one was around, I experimented in secret. A brush of makeup here, a borrowed blouse there, shoes that felt unfamiliar, yet strangely right. At first, it was clumsy, awkward, full of guilt and fear. But slowly, it became less about pretending and more about discovering. Each layer I added revealed something deeper, like peeling back the skin of an old life to uncover the truth beneath. Not everyone understood. Some of my friends laughed when they caught hints of change. Others judged quietly, their silence louder than words. But a few, a precious few, stood by me. They told me that identity wasn't something stolen or faked, it was something uncovered. And they reminded me that the courage I had shown that night could guide me forward now. I started to see patterns I had ignored my whole life. The discomfort I had always carried, the sense of never quite fitting in, the restless searching for belonging, it all clicked into place. That night at the wedding hadn't created something new. It had revealed what had always been there. The transformation wasn't easy. It was filled with mistakes, setbacks, tears, and moments when I wanted to retreat. But each time I remembered walking down that aisle, standing at the center of so many eyes, and not crumbling. Each time I remembered the way it felt to be seen, truly seen, even if it was under false circumstances. And that memory gave me strength. Over time, the story of the missing bride faded from gossip, swallowed by newer scandals and fresher dramas. To most, I was just a footnote in a night gone wrong. But to me, it was the night everything began. The night a dare turned into destiny. The night I stepped into a role I never thought was mine, only to realize it had been waiting for me all along. I no longer crash weddings. I no longer hide behind borrowed suits or false bravado. I walk into rooms as myself now. Not the old version, not the imposter, but the person I discovered that night beneath lace and veil. The transformation wasn't about becoming someone new, it was about finally allowing myself to become who I truly was. And though I wasn't meant to be the bride that night, in a strange, fateful way, I always was. The secret couldn't stay hidden forever. For weeks I carried it in silence, building a new self behind closed doors. But secrets have a way of slipping through the cracks. It started small, a forgotten makeup wipe in the trash, a blouse tucked carelessly under my bed, a new softness in my voice when I wasn't paying attention. My family noticed. They asked questions I dodged, gave me looks that lingered too long. The tension grew until one evening, it all came to a head. I was sitting at the kitchen table when my mother confronted me. She had found a dress I had hidden, folded carefully at the back of my closet. She held it in her hands, her face pale, her voice trembling as she asked, "What is this?" My heart pounded, every instinct screaming to lie, to make excuses, to laugh it off as a joke. But I was so tired of lies. I was so tired of hiding. So for the first time, I told the truth. I told her about the wedding, about the dress, about the night that changed everything. I told her how I couldn't forget the reflection I saw, how I couldn't unfeel the way it made me whole. My words stumbled, my voice cracked, but I kept going because I had to. When I finished, the silence was unbearable. She stared at me, her eyes brimming with confusion and fear. And then she whispered, "I don't understand." Those words cut deep, but they weren't rejection. They were the beginning of a battle not against her, but against years of expectations, traditions, and fears. The days that followed were filled with arguments, tears, slammed doors. Some family members refused to speak to me. Others tried to fix me, as though this was a mistake I could erase. But there were also glimmers of hope. My younger sister stood by me, fiercely protective, reminding me that I wasn't alone. My best friend, the one who dared me into crashing the wedding in the first place, admitted he never imagined the night would lead here, but told me he'd fight for me if I needed it. Acceptance didn't come overnight. It didn't come easily. It was a storm I had to walk through, drenched, battered, and exhausted. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering if it would have been easier to stay hidden. There were days I looked in the mirror and questioned if I was strong enough to keep going. But every time I faltered, I remembered that aisle, that veil, that impossible night when I stood before hundreds of strangers and somehow didn't fall apart. If I could survive that, I could survive this. Slowly, painfully, the storm began to calm. My mother softened first. One evening she sat beside me, tears in her eyes, and admitted that though she still struggled to understand, she loved me more than her confusion. My father came next, quieter, less emotional, but his acceptance showed in actions rather than words. He fixed the strap on a dress I had bought, his hands steady, his silence loud with support. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. The wider world was harder. Friends drifted away. Strangers stared. Whispers followed me. But there were also unexpected kindnesses: a neighbor who complimented me sincerely, a teacher who encouraged me, an old friend who reconnected just to say they were proud of me. The balance between cruelty and compassion was uneven, but it was enough to keep me moving forward. The transformation wasn't just about clothes or makeup. It was about reclaiming a life I had never allowed myself to live. Each step was terrifying, but each step also made me stronger. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing the wedding night as a mistake. I started seeing it as a gift. Because without it, I might have spent the rest of my life in hiding, never daring to become who I truly was. Years later, I was invited to another wedding. This time, I didn't crash it. I walked in openly, wearing the dress I chose, standing tall in the identity I had fought for. When people looked at me, they didn't see an imposter or a stand-in. They saw me. And as I watched the bride walk down the aisle, radiant and trembling, I thought back to that night when fate shoved me into her place. I thought about how terrified I had been, how unprepared, how unwilling, and yet how that single night had opened a door I never knew existed. I wasn't the bride that night because of destiny or mistake. I was the bride because, deep down, some part of me was always waiting for the chance to be. The gown, the veil, the vows, they weren't just props in a charade. They were symbols, mirrors reflecting a truth I had buried too long. So when people ask me how it all began, I tell them the truth. It began with a dare. It began with fear. It began with a crash gone horribly wrong. But it ended with me becoming who I was meant to be. That's why I say, without hesitation, that the night I thought I ruined everything was actually the night I found everything. Because in the moment I was forced to be the bride, I finally realized I always was.